Hello and welcome to today's episode of Community Connections, airing right here on OROMIA11. I am your host, Anna Orr. And today, we are currently 48 hours after the general election. Tensions are high on both sides across the country. As of November 6th at 4 p.m., Vice President Kamala Harris conceded the United States presidential election to Donald Trump. According to government officials, ballots are still being counted up until Friday, November 8th. I want to talk a bit about what's next for many around this state and the country. I know that during this election season, there was a lot of information surrounding the two candidates, Madam Vice President Kamala Harris and Minnesota's Governor Tim Walz for the Democratic Party, with Donald Trump and J.D. Vance for the Republican Party. One of the largest keys to the Republican campaign was Project 2025. Today we will talk about this initiative and its perilous implications for our civil rights and civil liberties. Disclaimer: OROMIA11 Media doesn't endorse or oppose candidates for elected office, but we recognize that the re-election of Donald Trump as president will have immense implications for the future of our democratic norms, institutions, and processes. In 2022, the Heritage Foundation, a conservative-leaning think tank, and 140 former Trump staffers authorized Project 2025 into existence, a roadmap for how to replace the rule of law with right-wing ideals. Let's talk Project 2025 and what we can do to stay engaged with government locally and nationally. Now, locally, you can check your ballot. There are plenty of ways to Google how to make sure your ballot has been counted. Locally, you can also stay up to date with your ward and city council. Join your local neighborhood association. And nationally, read and watch the news in other areas. Ways in which we can take care of ourselves during this time. Tap in with your face-to-face community, which means meeting your neighbors, talking to your faith leaders, going out taking walks. This gives you an opportunity to disconnect as well as still have human-to-human contact. I also recommend disconnecting from technology and social media. Start connecting with your family and make sure to move your body. What citizens can do in the long term as well as immediate future for the days ahead. These are all going to be necessary for us to take care of ourselves. Now, you're probably asking yourself, what is Project 2025? Project 2025 is a federal policy agenda and blueprint for a radical restructuring of the executive branch. Authored and published by former Trump administration officials in partnership with the Heritage Foundation, a longstanding conservative think tank that opposes abortion and reproductive rights, LGBTQ rights, immigrants' rights, and racial equity. Project 2025's largest publication, Mandate for Leadership, is a 900-page manual for reorganizing the entire federal government agency by agency to serve a conservative agenda. Project 2025 includes a long list of extreme policy recommendations touching on nearly every aspect of American life, from immigration and abortion rights to free speech and racial justice. A number of its recommendations rely on support from the executive branch and from Congress. Many other initiatives are outright unconstitutional. You're probably asking yourself, what are some of the plans, proposals included in Project 2025? Project 2025 calls for hundreds of individual policy changes that will impact our constitutional freedoms and every aspect of our lives. Among them are cutting abortion access, severely limiting abortion access nationwide by reversing the FDA's approval of mifepristone, a drug used in medication for abortion, and reviving a 19th century law, the Comstock Act, to ban any abortion medications, equipment, or materials from being sent through the U.S. Postal Service. What can you do? Restore our rights, reproductive freedom now. As politicians continue to attack our bodily autonomy nationwide, tell Congress to act. Another facet of Project 2025 will be mass deportations, targeting immigrant communities through mass deportations and raids, ending birthright citizenship, separating families, and dismantling our nation's asylum system. What can you do today? Demand that we shut down the ICE detention machine. Immigration detention is inhumane, arbitrary, and rife with abuse. Urge Joe Biden and the Biden administration to close ICE detention facilities across the country. Another facet of Project 2025 would be the abuse of warrantless surveillance, exploiting the executive branch's vast and unprecedented power to spy on Americans' lives with warrantless surveillance of our data. How Trump's proposed radical expansion of executive power will impact our freedoms? Congress can fight back against egregious violations of our privacy by the government. Tell them to take action now. Project 2025 offers an opportunity for them to unleash undue force on protesters, violating the First Amendment by using federal law enforcement to target journalists and protesters. If you want to talk about how Trump's proposed radical expansion of the executive power will impact our freedom, a second Trump administration threatens to use executive authority to further limit First Amendment freedoms, surveil Americans, and undermine any type of our civil liberties. There will be severe limited access to voting, abusing executive power to interfere in our elections by criminalizing the voting process and damaging fair representation. Another facet of Project 2025 offers the censoring of critical discussion in classrooms, censoring academic discussions about race, gender, and systemic oppression in violation of the First Amendment, and promising to cut federal funding for schools with curricula that touch on these subjects. What we can do to stop this censorship would be defend your rights, learn as much as you can, and join in the fight against classroom censorship. In 2023, more than 100 classroom censorship bills aimed at restricting students and teachers from discussing race, gender, or sexual orientation were in existence. There will be an effort in Project 2025 to also roll back trans rights. This will be the weaponizing of federal law to require states and private actors to discriminate against transgender people by threatening to sue schools that protect the rights of trans students, or telling hospitals that they would lose their Medicaid funding if they provide gender-affirming care to trans adolescents. If you can't tell, the focus of Project 2025 is taking away so many liberties that we have taken for granted, from healthcare, education, freedom of speech, and so much more. What you can do with us today: you can protect trans care now, as wave after wave of extreme measures to criminalize and strip trans people of rights and safety continue. Tell Congress to act now. Now, we've talked just a bit about the many platforms that are taking place and policies that are going to be able to go into effect with the re-election of Donald J. Trump and J.D. Vance. But what we need to do is reach out to Congress and make sure that we are keeping up to date locally and nationally with what's going on in our communities. Unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for today's episode of Community Connections. I hope that something shared today you have found educational and/or inspiring. In the days ahead, make sure that you take care of yourselves and each other. As always, I am your host, Anna Orr, and this has been an episode of Community Connections airing right here on OROMIA11. I look forward to connecting again with you soon.